Because is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Wednesday morning to discuss once again the latest stuff from the world of football, from the world of sport. Apologies, do bear with me as I continue to struggle with a bit of a cough and a cold, hoping to recover in the coming couple of days, but it's been a very, very difficult last few days, starting back from the weekend and things like that. But I hope I will be better with time. Hopefully, really, without needing for a return trip to the hospital. But yeah, it's good to be back on this beautiful Wednesday morning. It's 31 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. that we do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda. Yesterday we did witness some action from the Spanish La Liga as Atletico de Madrid got beat by 3-1 at the hands of Barcelona, while Manchester City had a bit of a scare as they completed the most consecutive wins against a Premier League team, having beaten up against Fulham by in 19 fixtures across all competitions. So really, excuse me. So really, it was interesting to watch, especially that second half. It had a lot to give. Manchester City nervously ending the game. Good morning, Pedri. How are you doing, my brother? Buenos dias. Campenos, ole, ole. I think you're celebrating your Barcelona victory there. Is everything okay with your health? We will be better. We will be better, certainly, with time. We're not where we want to be, but we're hopeful that we will be better in the coming days. But yeah, how are you, my brother, this morning? Tell me, what did you make of Barcelona's victory yesterday against Atletico? Robert Lewandowski missing a penalty in that one, while he forced Jan Oblak as well into a very brilliant save. Lamine Yamal firing the blanks. Rafinha back on the score sheet. I mean, it is Bevos of the cold. Not really. Contrary, by the way, it's a very hot season this side. It's a very hot period of time, and not that essentially during this time it's a hot season, but we've had, a lot of sunshine in the last couple of weeks, even though there have been some downpours as well. You say I prefer Robert Kesakos over Lewandowski. Now, told you so. But yeah, Danny Olmo, Ferran Torres, they are, aspiring to make sure that Barcelona walk away with all 3 points. Ferran Torres' goal coming really, really late in the game, in the 6th minute of added time. Released Alex Baina, who had been deemed initially to be offside, had scored early on in the 19th minute to give Atletico de Madrid the lead. And then, of course, Rafinha restored parity in spectacular fashion, rounding off Jan Oblak to score into an empty net. So overall, Barcelona looked impressive out there. Of course, if Atletico de Madrid had been clinical enough, then probably or possibly would have been discussing a totally different result at the end of it all. But the bit of damage was reduced by Barcelona, because at the end of the day, Atletico de Madrid only had 2 shots on target, whereas Barcelona had 6. And as many as 9 shots off target are really Atletico de Madrid had 4. So Atletico de Madrid will agree that suddenly Barcelona were the better side. When I looked, there's a chance that was missed by Almada. Yes, Almada missed a great opportunity there. Julian Alvarez really had a bit of a dull game, or an underperformance by the measure of his own standards, really. So they'll be hoping to do much, much better than they did against Barcelona in their subsequent fixtures, if they are to stay ahead of the curve. Excuse me on that. But like I told you, I do struggle with that. So action in the Spanish La Liga will continue today as Atletico Bilbao will be at San Mamés against Real Madrid. We know for a fact that Real Madrid are winless in the last three games. Have That's in the Spanish La Liga, all of them ending in draws. Pedri says Almada, with that chance, basically played with our defense, made them sit down. Thankfully, he didn't score. I mean, yeah, it was really, really beautiful, a moment to watch. I could only sit and hope that if he had wrapped up that with a cool finish, then possibly would have been going down as one of the goals of the month, if not the season, as the season goes on. It was a very, very beautiful moment, but he couldn't, he did not have the composure to complete really well. I think Bilbao will win over Real Madrid. I mean, Real Madrid have been, I don't want to say shambolic, but they've been so average in recent games that envisioning their victory seems to be like a bit of a distance out. And I do not say that particularly because they're up against Bilbao, but because they've not they've not showcased themselves as a team that wants to win the league title, especially if you're drawing games against Vallecano, against Elche, and against Girona. I mean, at least one off would understand, but the other two really. I mean, we're talking about a Rio Oviedo side that are bottom of the league. You know, yes, Elche, a mid-table team, and Varicana have been a bit of a surprise in some way or form for some teams this season, and that's to a certain level acceptable. But the other two should be winnable fixtures when you look at the context of the Spanish La Liga. And in any case, anyways, we'll have to wait and see how it is all going to be decided. But Barcelona seem to be pulling away now, having a 4 points lead, and I'm sure Real Madrid, very well knowing what did transpire last season, would not want to would want to limit that gap to as small as possible. You know, especially when you still bear in mind that it's only match day 15 of the Spanish La Liga, but you still do not want Barcelona overly pulling away. You see, when a team overly pulls away, is that there comes a point, even when they falter, you cannot capitalize on that. You know that the gap is so big that even if they lose a game or draw another game, your win, I mean, is less impactful given the sort of healthy gap that they have between you and them. So basically, that's what Real Madrid will be wanting to avoid in as far as the title chase is concerned, as Barcelona seek their 29th Spanish La Liga title, and I think is what supposed to be the 37th for Real Madrid. Atletico de Madrid have poised themselves in and around there as a chasing pack. They've equally lost two games this season, as many as Barcelona. They have one win less compared to Barcelona and have many, many draws. As many as 4 draws. Those came earlier on in the season when they sort of had a bit of a slow start. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens in there. Quickly, let's race away from the Spanish La Liga and go over yesterday to the Premier League, because Everton managed to bounce back from their 4-1 defeat against Newcastle over the weekend and beat up against Everton by a goal to nil. That goal came in the second half through Jack Grealish with, I think, Carlos Alcaraz providing the assist. The goal being scored at 12 minutes from the 90th minute mark. So they were very able to hold on to that. It's not a game I did watch, so I won't give you the ins and outs of how it really, really transpired, because I was busy catching up on the Manchester City game. I really keeping tabs on the Barcelona game, as well as that game between Newcastle and Tottenham Hotspur, as we're going to see in a bit. But what I can say is that the result meant that Bournemouth are winless in their last 5. because they got beat by Sunderland over the weekend by 3 goals to 2. In there, they have a 4-0 defeat at the hands of Aston Villa. They have a 3-1 defeat at the hands of Manchester City. So you can see that it's been loss after loss. It's been 4 losses in the last 5. Really, there's been, I think, only 1 draw, and that was the 2-all draw against West Ham United. So Andoni Iraola ought to pull up his stockings, or he ought to pull up out his, playbook from the days of him being managed by Marcelo Bielsa at Athletic Bilbao to sort of motivate his team back into playing some really, really good football. Otherwise, it did not look pretty for this Bournemouth side. Excuse me. So that was it. So in the other game, Manchester City had to, I don't know, because when you say grind out a result against Fulham, you make it will make it feel like it was that close, that as if they won 1-0 or they won 2-1. No, Manchester City at one point were leading that game by 5-1 in the second half. To tell you that it ended 5-4 and could have almost ended 5-5, if you did not watch the game, you'd be thinking to yourself, what on God's green earth happened to Manchester City? Well, it did happen, but in a game where Brad Erling Haaland could have scored a hat-trick, by the way. He could have easily scored a hat-trick, but it did not fall for him. He ended up, he ended up with a bunch of with a bunch of assists and a goal to his name as well. But Manchester City in the first half were overly dominant in most of the things they did. When it came to ball possession in the first half, they were the dominant side. When it came to shots on goal, when it came to gliding through that midfield, dominating the midfield area, they were the better side in as far as the first half was concerned. But like I said, it ended up being a very, very uncomfortable victory for Manchester City. And personally, because I was following really, really well in the first half, and Brad Erling Haaland missed the first opportunity that fell to him very early on in the game. He managed to get past Bernardino in goal, but his sort of strong shot hit the base of the upright and went out of play and sort of and skid back into play, but going across the face of goal, really. And it stayed goalless at the time. And then in the 17th minute, I mean, he's that dangerous suspect. There's that cutback for him by Jeremy Doku that gets skipped. I do not remember which other player that was within the box to leave it for Brad Erling Haaland to strike it quite hardly into the back of the net to give Man City the lead. And then that was in the 17th minute. And then 20 minutes later, you had Tijan Reinders score to make it 2-0, while towards the tail end of the first half, Bernard Leno literally gifted Phil Foden when he failed to deal properly with that corner kick, and then he punches it not far enough, just on to the edge of the 18 yards box, and Phil Foden gets to it and wraps his foot, strong left foot around it, and takes it into the back of the corner. He had a very direct sight of goal. I thought the defenders also let Bernard Leno a bit down. They were slow to react to that. And then Manchester City scored their third. So then in the second minute of the first half, because I think there's a couple of minutes that had been added in the first half, Emil Smith-Rowe scored to sort of pull one back for Fulham. And that assist was by Harry Wilson. Even though Fulham had scored, I did not think that, this looks like Fulham is going to mount a comeback. No, I did not feel that. It felt like a lapse in concentration at the tail of a very comfortable first half for Manchester City that they ended up conceding. Guys, I have this dry throat that keeps nagging. So indulge with me. Indulge me if I sort of speak with a bit of a cracked voice. But like I was saying, it's typical of that moment where you're cruising, you're dominating the game, you're 3-0 up. It's towards the tail end of the first half. It's a set piece moment that they leverage on with Emily Smith Rowe with that diving header that beats Gianluigi Donnarumma. Then we return for the second half, and Manchester City decide to go on to complete the sort of what was supposed to be a rout, with Phil Foden scoring in the 48th minute. That was 3 minutes after the restart. So that was to further sink the whatever pep talk Marco Silva had given his team at halftime, And then in the 54th minute, Sander Berge conceded an own goal, and it was 5-1. So I don't think anybody would have thought that there was possibly a way back for Fulham, especially given the context that we had discussed that they had been winless against Manchester City in the last five, really scoring about only 3 goals in 5. So it gave nobody confidence. It gave nobody illusions that Fulham were onto something here, really, because they never seemed to be like they were onto something or onto anything. In any case, but yet still, you felt that maybe, just maybe, something is bound to come up. So really, and then somehow they started to conjure out something, because 3 minutes after Manchester City go 5-1, Alex Iwobi scores a brilliant ball to make it 5-2. Now, the ball was a little bit from distance, but there's a way he wraps sort of the inside of his right foot to it, almost to hit it with that part between the ankle bone and the heel, that sort of part. That's how he sort of takes that ball beyond the reach of Gianluigi Donnarumma in goal, and it's 5-2. Then, of course, among the changes, I think Samuel Chikwueze had come on for, he had come on for Samuel Chikwueze. He had come on at the start of the second stanza, I think, for, was it Sander Berge? Was it? Or Lukic? Let me see. I need to confirm. I need to confirm that a team change, because it was really, really, really impactful in as far as the game was concerned. Yes, Sasa Lukic. So he came on for Sasa Lukic. That's Samuel Chikwueze, the former Villarreal player. For those of you that do remember him, he's on loan from AC Milan to this Fulham side. So, and he scored in the 72nd minute. Again, Manchester City failed to deal, I think, with the second ball from a corner kick, and on he goes. They really, really struggled to defend set pieces as well. So, especially when it came to second balls, and that's when they were punished the most. So he scores in the 72nd minute to make it 5-3. And I remember looking at the clock and I'm saying, oh, we still have at least an hour to play, and Fulham are capable of scoring another and making this really, really uncomfortable for Manchester City. And it was typically that, because yet again, they failed to deal with another second ball after defending a set piece. And in the 78th minute, Samuel Chikwueze was at it again, scoring to make it 5-4. He really, really had a very impactful cameo. The one that you would hope he could, if he only could give you sort of consistently, game week, game out, because that kind of performance is the kind of performance that on another day should win you a point, that on another day should be winning you results, all 3 points against perhaps a lesser opponent if you're not facing off with Manchester City. Manchester City's defense looked very unsettled, looked very unorganized as Fulham scored those 3 goals in the second half, really. But Manchester City managed to hang in there for dear life. I remember there was 8 minutes of added time, but the referee let the game go on until, I think, for another extra 2 minutes. And you could see the nerves creeping in. You could see when Ryan Cherki gets booked for, I think, the only booking of the game for trying to delay a quick restart by Fulham when Manchester City were not having the control of the ball, because Fulham dominated the affairs of the second half. They were dominant in that midfield. They were winning the duels. They were dominating possession. They were outplaying Manchester City in majority of the aspects. After Man City had scored those early goals in the second half, it was all about Fulham. It was almost one-way traffic in some respect at that point. So and again, you'll know that at the end of it all, Fulham had 6 attempts on goal, shots on target on goal. Okay, I don't know why they're telling me it was only 4 for Man City when they scored 5. Clearly, something is wrong with that. I don't know what's wrong with those Premier League statistics. But for me, Fulham were really, really impressive in the second half. And again, it was another team that dominated Man City in terms of possession to the tune of 57% compared to Man City's 43%. It's happened quite a number of times this season where a team comes and dominates the ball over Manchester City. I do not know whether Pep Guardiola is trying to explore a new method of winning games without having much of the ball, pretty much like he did in that 1-1 draw against Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium. I really don't know. But eventually, like I said, they managed to overcome Fulham for their 19th consecutive victory against Fulham across all competitions, the most of any team within the Premier League and things like that. So they won the game 5-4. Brought Erling Haaland, like I said, scored 1 and provided 2 assists. He could have had a hat-trick, but he hit the upright twice. So even in the second half, there's a moment where he sort of heads the ball and it goes off the upright. So it was a excuse me. It was a beautiful performance, really, from Fulham. Unfortunately for them, it's not one that delivered any point, so they won't have much to remember on it. But I remember thinking to myself that if you're a Fulham fan and you're watching your team get the better of Man City in the second half, outscoring them in the second half by 3-2 in the second half, really, you ought to give them some bit of credit, And I did think to myself, if the game had been to continue, possibly, Fulham would have equalized. But also, if Man City had been clinical with some of their other chances, they could have easily won it 7-4, Then Man City also had a goal line clearance by Joshko Vadiol. I think was the attempt by Joshua King or Kevin, one of those youngsters, because they brought on 2 youngsters, Joshua King and I think the other should be called Kevin, and they gave Man City a run for their money. Then there was another, I think, chance that fell to Samuel Chukwueze, but brilliant game of football, really, on the day. And then in the other result, we did see Tottenham Hotspur share the spoils against Newcastle in a 2-2 draw. Again, for me, I'll for Newcastle having been given a very unconvincing penalty for what was deemed to be impeding another player, for how Dan Burn was involved with Rodrigo Bentancur for them to win that penalty in the 86th minute. And once they went 2-1 up, thanks to Anthony Gordon, who had come off the bench to convert from the penalty spot, he thought, well, all 3 points are now for Newcastle. And it's almost done and dusted, because this was at St. James's Park, in front of that St. James's Park crowd, in front of those home fans. But Christian Romero, as he had done in the 70th minute, he had conjured up something in the 50th minute of stoppage time to go for a volley that sort of he didn't catch really, really well, because when you watch it, it sort of catches the sort of mid-leg point as opposed to his actual foot. But, it somehow ricochets through the Newcastle defense and beats Aaron Ramsdale, who wasn't overly pleased with how his team defended, really. So, but the first half had ended scoreless. Uh, it had a couple of close moments, but none yielding the fruit that any of them would have had hoped for. Brando Colomwani trying to put on a show for Tottenham Hotspurs. Unfortunately for him, he could not get himself on the score sheet. But second half substitute Bruno Guimaraes scored in the 71st minute to make it 1-0, while Christian Romero scored 7 minutes then later to restore parity before Anthony Gordon's penalty, and then Romero's completed his burst with that equalizer late on. Tottenham must have known that this was always going to be a difficult game going away to Newcastle, especially against a team that had just over a month ago beaten them by 2-0 in the fourth round of the EFL Cup. So you figured they would come more ready for this tussle, and indeed they did. Because Cristiano Romero ended up being voted the man of the match. Released in the Man City game, the man of the match accolade was given to Braut Erling Haaland for his goal and burst of assists. But yeah, I thought it was the kind of game that sort of went back and forth, but oftentimes not concluding with the desired finish, or in result or in product. Newcastle had the better XG at 2.04 and also dominated possession to the tune of 53% compared to Tottenham's 47%, who had a 0.75 kind of XG. Not that it matters that much, but Tottenham Hotspur had only 2 shots on target out of the total 8 that they had managed. Whereas Newcastle had 7 on target out of the total 19 they had managed. So Newcastle were unsurprisingly a bit dominant, a bit slightly better than their opponent, given it was a home game. I was hoping that they could sort of build onto that 4-1 victory that they would have had against Everton over the weekend to come and take all 3 points against Tottenham Hotspur, who have been in really, really poor form recently. But that was never the case. So anyways, let's wrap it there for now. Apologies. So our Premier League action on match day 14 does continue. Like I told you yesterday, it continues today and it will wrap up tomorrow. That will be Thursday when Man United go at home to host West Ham United. But in as far as Wednesday is concerned, we do have 4 games that kick off at 10:30 p.m. That's Arsenal versus Brentford, Brighton versus Aston Villa, Burnley will be up against Crystal Palace, while Nottingham Forest will be away to Molineux against Wolverhampton Wanderers. And then at 11:15 p.m., that's either at the halftime or at the tail end of the first half for the earlier kickoffs. Chelsea will be away to Leeds at Aaron Road, while Liverpool will be at Anfield against a difficult Sunderland. Now, our main event will be following the game between Arsenal and Brentford for our watch along, but we'll be giving you the results from elsewhere. But also, please take note that we may start the broadcasts after the first half of that game or at the tail end of the first half. Then also, because remember our broadcast comes at 11 p.m. Then also, I don't know. I don't think I should get into that debate of who is better. But it's good. This is a very, very important game for the Arsenal. One, Manchester City just piled on their pressure by winning against Fulham. We remember in the season also Arsenal went to Craven Cottage and only won by 0-0. So it's not an easy place to go. But they do take on Brentford. Brentford, one of those very, very difficult or itching opponents, as I would want to describe them. Very difficult team to break down. Yes, they do concede goals, but against big teams, they play with that low block. They play with the back 5. They play with the 5-3-2 kind of system. 5-3-2 kind of system, or sometimes Yeah, majority of the times when they come up against the big boys, that's how they tend to set up their team. Michael Kayode has been one of the outstanding players in as far as Bournemouth is concerned, even in the Premier League. I think he's completed more dribbles than any other player, and he's a defender. His long throw-ins are really, really famous, or have become famous within the Premier League. That pretty much Arsenal will be going into this game well knowing. When you look at the last five fixtures, Brentford have not beaten up against Arsenal any single one time. Really, there's been two draws, all ending in 1-1 all draws. Now, I do not want to assume that Arsenal could draw this game because that would be a huge, huge dent in their pursuit for glory. In as far as the Premier League title is concerned, they need to win to restore that 5-point lead at the summit as they away to play Aston Villa in the early kickoff on Saturday next weekend. So when you look at the form table, like Arsenal have drawn 2 of the last 5. They've won the other 3, winning against Spurs, Burnley, and Leeds United. And Crystal Palace. Whereas in sharp contrast, Brentford have won a couple, beating up against Liverpool by 3 goals to 2. Excuse me. Before losing to Crystal Palace by 2 goals to 0. They beat up against Newcastle by 3 goals to 1, and then lost to Brighton in a 2-1 defeat. Then they beat up against Burnley in their last league outing by 3 goals to 1. So they've lost 2 and won 3. They've lost 2 and won 3 over the last 5. Really, Arsenal have only won Arsenal have also won 3 and drew 2. So really, Arsenal have only lost 1 game this season. That was against Liverpool away to Anfield on match day 3. They still remain the team that has conceded the least number of goals, although those goals have come thick and fast in the last couple of games. 2 against Sunderland and 1 against Chelsea, another against Liverpool. Not Liverpool, Tottenham Hotspurs. Yeah, they've conceded as low as 7 goals, but it's showing a pattern because you have to go back to that victory against Burnley for them to have kept a clean sheet in the last 4 games, really. And in terms of players, we know that when it comes pound for pound, quality for quality, I think Arsenal have it the better. Maybe the only player that you will pull out of that Brentford side to start for the Arsenal could be Igor Thiago, the player who has 11 goals to his name in as far as this campaign is concerned. And in any case, I have this expectation that Arsenal will concede on the day. I have a feeling they will win, but they will need to grind it out. It's not going to be a result that comes easy. They will need to work hard for it. They will need to defend it. We've seen that previously. I think in their 2-1 victory over Arsenal last season, but one when I think was it Kai Havertz that scores in that game. Excuse me. Yeah, I think it was Kai Havertz's goal in the 86th minute that bailed out Arsenal on that evening. So, of course, it's a different manager in Keith Andrews, but he will know not to differ much on what Thomas Frank used to do when such big games came around. So, it's a very, very important game for the Arsenal in the context of the Premier League table. Is this a kind of game that you sort of chop your team? I would say it's a kind of game where you get to rotate. Let's see Ben White at right back. Give your team a bit of a rest. Let's see, perhaps Declan Rice take a rest. Start with Zubi Mendy alongside Martin Odegaard and Ebelechi Eze, or you would still have Christian Nogard on the touchline there, sort of ready to come on against his former side. Arsenal have 2 former Brentford players in Christian Nogard and David Raya. Speaking of injuries, Arsenal will be without Gabriel Magalhaes, while Mikel Arteta did say that for Leandro Trossard and William Saliba, it's a matter of days, but he couldn't give the press anything about their exact date or their expected return. Then who else is out injured? The game will come a little too early for Gabriel Jesus. He also did talk about Kai Havertz. He said it's a matter of weeks, so he's still out for a couple of weeks. Whether it's 2 weeks, whether it's 3 weeks, you and I do not know. But he did say that he has started, recovering. He's doing some things on the grass, although he's not yet involved in the majority of the team training. I'm going to go for a 3-2 victory for the Arsenal. I do not know why I think it will be 3-2, but I know Arsenal have looked a bit vulnerable in recent times in terms of securing their goal. Not because they've conceded one too many, but by how they started off the season. You can see that there's been sort of a downgrade in that regard. So do not miss out on that action from the Premier League on Wednesday night. Then the other important game I thought that we should touch on is the game between Liverpool and Sunderland. Liverpool and Sunderland, we know that Sunderland is one of those very difficult teams to beat up against, and yet somehow, because somehow they are sixth on the Premier League log after 13 games played, 6 wins, 4 draws, and only 3 losses to their name. Really, they're easy. They're not easy to crack down. They can't let you have the ball and take it to them. But once they set up in front of goal, you penetrating them is going to be a very huge task, in that respect. So, but we will see. Liverpool having won over the weekend by 2-0 against West Ham, they will be hoping that they can keep that small momentum going for them by avoiding a defeat. Tomorrow, I do not think any of them could have thought that they would have lost by now 6 games in the season and won the other 7. So really, at 21 points, of course they are tied on points with Man United. Then in there you have Newcastle. It's the kind of season. Although Newcastle have 19 points, having failed to win up against Tottenham Hotspur. But yeah. The likes of Crystal Palace. So they really need to win. That's a Liverpool, and not for the sake of building their momentum, but for what it implies on the Premier League table. Like I told you, the point disparity is not that big across multiple teams in the Premier League. So, for example, I need to refresh this to have the updated table. I don't know. Yes, okay, it's finally up to date. So you have Manchester City, who are at 28 points, only 2 ahead of Arsenal. When you look at Man City, when you look at them coming within 2 points, when you look at Chelsea at 24 points, Aston Villa, the same number of points. So if Liverpool can win, they get into that 24-point club. So that means, the likes of Brighton, Sunderland, and everybody else will be looking over their shoulders, wondering whether the reigning champion is back. Like I've continuously said, it doesn't take much for you to rise up in the Premier League rankings, because all you need to do is put on a couple of consistent performances while winning games, and you'll elevate yourself. So Liverpool will come up against a very tough opponent, a very physical side, a side that is not easy to beat. I think Reggie Libris has done really tremendously well in as far as Sunderland are concerned. Their only worry will come when some of these players have to travel away for the Africa Cup of Nations, which starts in December this year, 21st in Morocco. But that notwithstanding, this does come in their absolute presence. So really, Sunderland is too difficult and a very stubborn side. So I wouldn't be surprised if the game ends in a 1-1 draw. I don't know. I'm not convinced to root for Liverpool. Yes, they are at home. Yes, they are the reigning champions, blah, blah, blah. But we've seen Sunderland dismiss even the biggest of bullies in the yard, including beating up against Chelsea by 2-1, as well as, won during the election, you know. So apologies on that. So, so I mean, for Liverpool, we spoke about this when we're looking at their upcoming fixtures. Against Sunderland, Leeds, Brighton, Spurs, Wolves. And I was saying, win against West Ham, even if you do against Sunderland, you will be excused. Win against Leeds, fight for victory against Brighton, beat up against Tottenham Hotspurs, and against Wolverhampton Wanderers. But if you do drop some points against Brighton, it will be understandable. We know that Anasford is under a lot of pressure because of the kind of club and or size of club that he does manage. Is it unfortunate for him? I do not want to think so, but in some form or shape, he's been the architect of his own failure for the lack of results. But you know, Liverpool should expect a very, very physical game. And because of that physicality, I get the feeling that Liverpool could be thrown off. First of all, they will come knowing that Sunderland, that we must try and bully Liverpool into submission with Grant Xhaka, Sadiq Noah, all in the mix of that cohort. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between Liverpool and Sunderland. That's a prediction I'm going to go for. And then the other game is, for me, a very winnable fixture when Chelsea go away to Leeds United. The reason as to why I say it's a winnable fixture, if you want to challenge for the Premier League title, these are the kinds of teams you have to beat up against. They're up against Chelsea. Next for them is Liverpool. After that, the Brentford and Crystal Palace, as well as Sunderland. To wrap up the month of December. Then while you wrap up the month of December, you can see that those are very, very difficult fixtures. Whereas just you have Leeds, have Bournemouth, have Everton, Newcastle, and Aston Villa. It becomes a bit tougher at the actually from the Bournemouth game. We know that Andoni Iraola is capable of outsmarting and outwitting any Premier League manager, but things have just not happened for his side in recent times. And nonetheless, I think if I were to give my prediction, what would it be? I think I'd go with Chelsea to win by 3-0. Chelsea have done well to avoid conceding goals in the last couple of games. And when you go look at their statistics, you'll equally be impressed. I think they've had what has it been 5 clean sheets against Forest, against Bournemouth. So in that sort of run of things. So let's wait and see what they will be able to come up with. But yeah, they kept a clean sheet against Spurs, against Wolves, against Burnley. Really, they conceded in the 2-1 defeat to Sunderland and the 1-0 draw against Arsenal. But Chelsea will be without Moises Caicedo, will be serving his suspension following that red card that he did receive against Arsenal. I do not think Chelsea will be in lack of players to slot in there, whether it's Darius Sugo, who last I checked, he was still out injured. They still have players like Romeo Lavia, although last I checked, they had been out injury. Romeo Lavia and Lewis Cole, Will Darius Sugo. Excuse me, but you do have Richie James, you have Andre Santos, and Enzo Fernandez. All players, depending on how you set up your team, can play in that role. And again, you're against a very open-ended lead side, who's by the way, Daniel Fakir is equally under pressure. His job could be on the line quite soon. He could be shown the exit from Leeds United. So yeah, I equally look down or forward to that game as well. But let's wait and see what it will deliver. So for me, yeah, Liverpool, Sunderland, 1-1 draw. Leeds, Chelsea, I've gone for 3-0 Chelsea. Arsenal, Brentford, I've gone for a marginal 2-1. Brighton versus Aston Villa, I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. Burnley, Crystal Palace, 2-0. Wolves versus Nottingham Forest, I expect Nottingham Forest to win, maybe by 2-1. So yeah, those are my predictions for Wednesday. Do let me know what your thoughts are. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure doing this with you. Thank you so much, Pedri, for having been part of this podcast earlier on and for your kind submissions to help our broadcast. So, what else? I think we've exhausted it all in as far as our talking points are concerned. Unless there's anything that you feel we've not touched upon, but I want to wish you a blessed day. Enjoy, and let's link up again tonight to discuss, to follow the results from those games and see how the Premier League table will be looking at the end of match day 14. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure. Bye bye from me to you.